He was just a poor mechanic, quiet and visible, hanging from the side of a Manhattan skyscraper, washing windows one floor at a time. But when he reached the 36th floor, a woman inside froze. She didn't scream. She didn't call security. She walked straight to the glass, looked him in the eyes, and whispered something no one could have expected. What happened next wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was the beginning of a story that would change both their lives forever. If you love stories about kindness, second chances, and love that breaks through every barrier, emotional and literal, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps bring more heartwarming stories like this to life. Now let's begin. A poor mechanic was washing windows. The CEO inside looked at him and said, "I won't let you go." The squeegee slid across the glass in steady, practiced motions, leaving behind streaks of water that glimmered in the morning sun. Liam Carter adjusted the harness strapped across his shoulders, leaning slightly against the support line, as the city sprawled beneath him like a living map. From 36 stories up, everything looked smaller cars like ants people, like shadows, buildings stacked like cardboard boxes. Up here it was quiet, almost peaceful, until he looked through the window. He'd cleaned hundreds of windows over the years, luxury hotels, glassy tech towers, penthouses belonging to people he would never meet. Most never even noticed him. That was the point, really. Invisible labor, necessary but unnoticed. But today was different. Behind the glass stood a woman in a fitted cream blazer, mid-30s, striking in a way that was elegant rather than loud. She had high cheekbones, sharp eyes the color of wet stone, and the kind of posture that belonged to people used to commanding attention. At first, Liam thought she was on a call, her lips slightly parted, brows drawn in concentration. Then she turned and looked at him. Really looked. Their eyes met. Liam froze. So did she. For a moment, everything else, his harness, the skyline, the distant honking below, fell away. She stepped closer to the window slowly, as if trying not to spook a wild bird. Her hand reached up and pressed against the glass. He couldn't hear her. Of course not. But he could read her lips as she mouthed the words, slowly, deliberately, like a vow she was making to herself. "I won't let you go." Liam blinked. What? She pressed her palm flat to the glass, her expression shifting from composed to something far more fragile. Tenderness, disbelief, emotion. She didn't seem prepared for herself. Liam's chest tightened, and not just from the altitude. He looked around to make sure he hadn't imagined it, but there was no mistaking it. She was looking at him, not through him, not around him, but at him like he was someone she'd been waiting for. He gave a polite, uncertain nod before turning back to his work, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement. His hands were calloused, his uniform worn at the seams. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. And here was this woman, refined, composed, almost ethereal, watching him like he'd just walked out of a dream she'd forgotten she had. He couldn't get down fast enough. Later that afternoon, Liam stood in the back room of Wyatt's garage, a tiny shop tucked between a sandwich place and a boarded-up bookstore in Brooklyn. Grease coated every surface. A cracked radio played old country songs in the background. "You look like you saw a ghost," Wyatt said, glancing up from under the hood of a '97 Chevy. "Or fell in love." Liam shook his head, forcing a chuckle. "Just a weird day at the office." "That window washing gig again?" "Yeah." Wyatt wiped his hands on a rag. "You ever think of sticking with just the garage? Could use more hands here." "I need the extra cash," Liam said quietly. "Sam's appointments aren't getting cheaper." Wyatt softened. "How's your brother doing?" Liam shrugged. "Brave. Too brave. He doesn't want me to worry." The garage fell quiet. Wyatt handed him a wrench. "You know," Wyatt said slowly, "sometimes I think fate doesn't knock. It stares you straight in the face through a 36-story window." Liam almost dropped the wrench. Across town, Eleanor Wynne sat at the edge of the leather couch in her corner office, her assistant's voice a distant murmur through the intercom. "Ms. Wynne, your lunch is here. Leave it." "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor stared at the glass fingertips brushing the surface where her hand had met his just hours ago. It couldn't be. But it was. 10 years ago, she'd been trapped in the twisted wreckage of a rental car on a lonely highway outside Buffalo. Rain was pouring her ankle, pinned her chest heaving. She remembered the scent of oil, the flickering headlights. And then him, a man with a strong grip and quiet eyes. He'd pulled her out before the fire caught, wrapped her in a rough gray cloth, disappeared before the paramedics arrived. She had never learned his name. Only the memory remained blurred but unforgettable. And now, 10 years later, she'd seen that same face, older but unmistakable, through the glass of her office window. His eyes were the same. So was the quiet strength behind them. It wasn't coincidence. It was a return. A knock pulled her out of her thoughts. Her assistant peeked in. "There's a call from facilities. Apparently you requested someone by name for an equipment inspection." Eleanor smiled slightly. "Yes. I want Liam Carter back here tomorrow." For another window wash, she stood. "No. I think it's time we brought him inside." That night, Liam sat on the edge of the bunk bed in his apartment, watching his younger brother Sam fiddle with an old radio. The room was small but warm. "Home," she said what Sam asked, blinking. Liam sighed. She mouthed, "I won't let you go." Like she knew me. Sam paused, then grinned. "Maybe she does. She's a CEO. I'm a mechanic/window scrubber. Maybe she sees something you don't." Liam looked out the window, this time from the inside. Across the alley, the city lights danced on the glass. He thought about her eyes again, about the way she didn't look away. Maybe that day on the highway hadn't been the end of a story. Maybe it was only the beginning. And for the first time in years, Liam let himself wonder. What if the glass wasn't a barrier? What if it was a doorway? The next morning, Liam Carter stood outside Everlight Tower, arms folded, expression pinched with skepticism. A soft wind lifted the collar of his canvas jacket as he stared up at the glittering panels of glass, rising high into the Manhattan sky. He'd received the call just before dawn. Someone from corporate facilities requested him by name to return for a follow-up inspection. That had never happened in his 4 years subcontracting for Northern Heights maintenance. Most clients didn't even know his name, much less request him specifically. And yet here he was. Again. A familiar ache settled in his gut, the kind he got when bills piled up or when Sam had a bad day at the clinic. He didn't have the luxury of indulging mystery or sentiment. He needed the hours. Still, something in him hesitated before entering. Something quiet, uneasy, alive. Liam tapped his ID at the security desk, nodded politely, and made his way to the executive elevators. The stainless steel doors whispered close behind him, sealing him in with his own reflection, calloused hands, sun-creased eyes, hair too long around the ears. When the doors opened on the 36th floor, he wasn't met by a facilities manager or office secretary. She was waiting for him. "Mr. Carter," said Eleanor Wynne, stepping forward from her glass-walled office. Her voice was clear, cultured, but with a warmth that surprised him. "Thank you for coming back so quickly." Liam's mouth went dry. "They said there was an inspection." "There is." Her eyes flicked to the glass panels behind her. "But it's not the windows I'm worried about." Before he could respond, she turned gracefully and walked back into her office. He hesitated only a second before following her in. The room was minimalist, but warm sculptural light fixtures, soft gray rugs, books lining 2 floating shelves. A coffee tray rested untouched beside a laptop that glowed faintly on her desk. But it was the wall of glass behind her that anchored the room, floor-to-ceiling panels with a sweeping view of the skyline and a clear memory etched into them from the day before. Liam stood awkwardly near the doorway. "You, wanted to speak to me?" Eleanor didn't sit. She faced him fully, her tone gentle but direct. "Do you remember a car crash outside Buffalo 10 years ago?" His breath caught. "You were driving past. It was raining hard. The car was smoking. You pulled someone out." His throat tightened. "I didn't stick around." "No, you didn't. You disappeared before the ambulance arrived." She took a careful step forward. "That woman was me." Liam's legs nearly gave out. His hand found the back of a nearby chair. "You had a gray cloth," she continued, voice steady. "You wrapped it around my arm. I held on to it for days. I remember the sound of your voice telling me I'd be okay." Liam's head shook slowly, as though trying to ward off a dream. "I wasn't anyone important back then," she said softly. "Just a junior analyst flying in for a friend's wedding. But you saved me. You vanished before I could even ask your name. I searched after, called hospitals, filed reports, but no one ever found you." He cleared his throat, his voice husky. "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know," she said. "That's why it meant everything." Silence stretched between them, thick with memory. She gestured toward the seating area by the windows. Please, sit with me. Liam lowered himself slowly onto the suede chair across from her. For a moment, he was hyper-aware of everything, how rough his jeans looked against the pristine rug, how out of place he felt beneath the glow of artful lighting and curated calm. But her gaze was unwavering, not judging, just searching. I've thought about that day more times than I can count, Eleanor said. And when I saw you out there yesterday, she exhaled. I couldn't believe it. I didn't think you'd remember me, he said almost under his breath. I never forgot. He swallowed hard, then let out a breath that had been trapped for years. I was just doing what anyone would have done. You'd be surprised how few actually stop. For a long time they sat in silence, the city humming behind them like background music. Finally, Eleanor leaned forward, resting her hands lightly on her knees. I asked you here because I wanted to thank you. Not just with words, with something that matters. Liam stiffened. If this is about it's not charity, she cut in gently. I'm building a new initiative, a sustainability program tied to urban transportation. It'll need mechanical expertise, community outreach, practical thinkers. People who understand the real world. People like you. Liam stared at her. I'm not qualified for that kind of thing. You fixed a Mustang on the side of a highway in the middle of a thunderstorm with 2 tools and a pocket flashlight. You kept a woman calm with smoke pouring into the car. And yesterday I watched you work with more care and precision than most executives I know show their teams. He looked down, unsure what to do with praise from someone like her. She leaned back, her voice softening. I'm not asking for an answer today, but I'm asking you to consider stepping inside the building next time, not just staying on the other side of the glass. Something in him flinched. He stood slowly, shoving his hands into his jacket pockets. People like me don't usually get invited into offices like this. She tilted her head. That's exactly the problem I want to fix. He met her eyes again this time, not as the stranger outside the window, but as the man she remembered and the man he could choose to become. I'll think about it, he said finally. Good, she stood too. I'll be here. As he walked back down the hall past rows of polished offices and silent stairs, Liam felt the strange pull of something new. A door half opened, a chapter not yet written. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't just looking through the glass. He was being asked to walk through it. The morning air in Brooklyn was sharp with the scent of machine oil and yesterday's rain. Liam Carter stood over the open hood of an old Ford Ranger, his mind miles from the engine in front of him. He could feel the weight of her words from yesterday still pressing against his chest, lingering like the smell of cologne long after the person has left the room. I'm asking you to consider stepping inside the building next time, not just staying on the other side of the glass. He had thought about it all night and all morning. He didn't belong in a place like that. He knew it as deeply as he knew the calluses on his own hands. Still, her voice, calm and steady, had stirred something in him. Not pride, Liam had never chased that, but possibility. And that scared him more than he wanted to admit. Hey, Liam, a voice called from behind. You tuning that truck or daydreaming about being on a beach somewhere? Liam looked up to find Wyatt Griggs, the garage's longtime owner, leaning against the doorframe with a coffee in one hand and an eyebrow raised. Neither, Liam muttered, wiping his hands on a rag. Wyatt stepped in, glancing over the engine. Looks like it's running smoother already. That's your touch. Liam offered a half smile. She's old but loyal. Wyatt sipped his coffee. So, you gonna tell me what's going on? You've been half here since yesterday. Not like you to tune out when there's work to be done. Liam hesitated, then gave a small nod. Remember that woman I told you about? The one in the office window, the one who stared at you like she just saw her long-lost first love. That one, Wyatt grinned. Let me guess. She tracked you down, offered you a private jet and a new life? Close, Liam said, surprisingly serious. She remembered me. From a car crash, 10 years ago. I pulled her out. She never knew my name until now. Wyatt's grin faded into quiet astonishment. You're serious. She wants me to help on some kind of project. A sustainability initiative. Something big, I think. And I don't know. Wyatt set his coffee down on the workbench, folded his arms. Look, I know you. You've never once done anything halfway. Whether it's fixing an engine or looking after your brother, if she sees something in you, maybe it's time you start seeing it too. Liam looked away. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, Wyatt said. You're afraid. That stopped Liam cold. I've known you since you were 19, Wyatt continued. And you've always been the guy who shows up, puts in the work, doesn't ask for credit. That's noble. But sometimes, Liam, it's okay to step into the light. You earned it. You earned that woman remembering you. Liam's hands tightened around the rag in his fist. Wyatt's voice softened. You're not just some guy who fixes things. You saved someone's life. Don't pretend that didn't mean something. It was the first time someone had ever said it aloud. That afternoon, Liam found himself standing outside the community clinic waiting for Sam. He leaned against a railing, watching the late spring sun filter through the thin leaves above. Sam emerged a few minutes later, wearing his usual hoodie and a stubborn smile, though his walk was slower than usual. Hey, Liam said, straightening up. How was it Dr. Mendoza says I'm stable? For now. Sam shrugged. But you're the one looking like you just got diagnosed. Liam chuckled dryly. Met someone. Sam's eyebrows shot up. Please tell me it's not another building manager with weird cats. No, Liam said, rubbing the back of his neck. It's a CEO. Sam stopped mid-step. Come again, Eleanor Wynne. Everlight Tower. Sam blinked. As in the Eleanor Wynne, the one who got profiled in Forbes for building that clean energy fund? The same. Sam let out a low whistle. Wow. What happened? Did she drop her purse out the window and you caught it midair? She remembered me. From a crash 10 years ago. I pulled her out. Never knew who she was until yesterday. Holy, she offered me a job. Something big. Said she wants someone real. Sam stared at him like he'd just announced he was running for Congress. And what did you say? I said I'd think about it. Sam stepped closer, his face suddenly serious. Liam, how many times do I have to tell you? You don't have to carry the world alone. You've done that for me since Mom and Dad died. Maybe it's time to let something or someone carry you for once. Liam was quiet for a long time. I'm scared, Sam, he admitted finally. I don't belong in that world. That building, those people, they wear suits that cost more than my truck. Maybe Sam said, but none of them pulled Eleanor Wynne out of a burning car. You did. That evening, Eleanor sat at her dining table in a high-rise penthouse that felt too quiet, too curated, too polished for the thoughts swirling in her mind. She had replayed their conversation over and over, watching for signs of interest, of retreat, of resistance. He was guarded, but he had listened. She had offered invitations before speaking, gigs, board seats, partnerships, but none of them had carried the same weight as this one. Because this time it wasn't business. It was personal. It was the first time in years she had felt something stir that wasn't ambition or strategy, but something far older and deeper. Hope. The doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, she nearly forgot to breathe. Liam stood there a little out of place in his dark jacket, looking like he'd spent the last hour arguing with himself and losing. I thought you said you'd think about it, she said gently. I did, he replied. I'm still thinking. She arched a brow. But I also realized something, he continued. You're not the only one who remembers that day. I do too. And for 10 years I've been running from it. From what it meant, from what it might still mean. He took a slow breath. You said you're building something real. If that's true, I want to help. Her lips parted, surprise flitting across her face before it melted into something warmer. She stepped aside. Then come in. And just like that, he did. The Mustang was parked in a quiet garage just off the Hudson River, nestled inside a repurposed brick warehouse Eleanor had converted into a private workshop. It was the kind of place you wouldn't expect a CEO to spend her afternoons, dusty, a little drafty, and lined with oil-stained workbenches. But for Eleanor, it was sacred ground. This was where she went when the weight of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions became too heavy. And today she wasn't alone. Liam stood over the open hood of the 1968 fastback sleeves, rolled up grease staining the edges of his palms. Eleanor stood just behind him, arms loosely folded, watching with quiet fascination. I've seen a dozen of these at car shows, he murmured, but I never expected to get under the hood of one that still breathes like this. I bought her with my first big bonus, Eleanor said, stepping closer. Most people in my position went for Teslas or vintage Ferraris. But this reminded me of my dad. He used to fix up old Fords on weekends. Liam nodded without looking up. He taught you to love engines. She smiled faintly. He taught me to respect the things that carry us forward. There was a pause long enough for the sound of city traffic beyond the open garage door to drift in. Then Liam stood up, wiping his hands with a rag. His eyes met hers. And the people who carry us, Eleanor's smile softened, but she didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the passenger side door and opened it. A faded photograph was tucked into the sun visor, two people, father and daughter, grinning with grease on their hands. That was the last day we spent in the garage together, she said, voice barely above a whisper. He passed 3 months later. Heart attack. I kept the car. And the memories. Liam stared at the photo. He'd be proud. Not many people hold on to things like this. Eleanor turned to him. Not many people would have risked their life to save a stranger in a burning car. His jaw tightened. I didn't think. I just moved. Exactly. She paused. That's what I need on this project, she continued. Someone who doesn't hesitate when it counts. Not just strategy or PR, but someone real. Someone who gets his hands dirty. Someone people trust without a title on a nameplate. Liam leaned back against the bench. You keep talking like this is bigger than a job. It is, she said. It's a statement. He studied her for a moment. And what statement is that? That real change doesn't come from the top, she replied. It comes from people like you, people who've lived through struggle, who've seen what needs fixing up close. I want this initiative to reach neighborhoods no one talks about, to bring mechanics and students together, to build something that runs, not just looks good on paper. Liam exhaled slowly. That's a lot of faith to put in someone you just met. I didn't just meet you, she said quietly. I've been trying to find you for a decade. His eyes dropped to the floor, the weight of her words pressing into the silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. You know, for years I tried to forget that day. Not because I regretted it, but because every time I remembered it, I wondered why me. Why was I the one who stopped? What if I hadn't? You did, she said, and I've spent every day since living with that gift. A beat passed between them. Raw, unvarnished. Then Liam cleared his throat. So what exactly would you need me to do? She smiled, bright real. Come to the design table. Help us figure out the mechanical side of things. Then help us teach it to others. You'd be the bridge between blueprint and boots on the ground. He chuckled. I've been called worse than a bridge. She stepped closer, the scent of lavender and machine oil oddly comforting. You know people are already talking, she said, lowering her voice with a smirk. Oh yeah, he said warily. Some of my shareholders think I've lost my mind. Spending time with a mechanic, hiring someone with no college degree for a sustainability rollout. He crossed his arms. And you care, Eleanor tilted her head. I care about what's right, not what looks neat in a headline. She stepped past him, hands brushing over the hood of the Mustang as she spoke. I've spent most of my adult life looking the part, Liam. Running from the version of me that cared more about people than quarterly margins. Maybe you walking back into my life isn't just chance. Maybe it's the world nudging me back to something real. Liam watched her. You talk a lot like someone who doesn't need anyone. Her eyes flicked back to him. That's the story people like me learn to wear, she said. But sometimes the mask cracks. And when it does, you hope someone's still there to see the face underneath? Liam didn't reply right away. He walked slowly to the front of the car, ran a hand along the hood, then looked up at her. I'll stay, he said, for now. But not because I want your charity. I never thought you did. I'll stay, he repeated, because I've spent too many years fixing broken things without ever building anything that lasts. Her smile returned softer now, touched with something vulnerable. Then let's build something, she said. Outside, the city buzzed oblivious. But inside the quiet of that garage, surrounded by steel and memories, something old had been set in motion again. Not just an engine, a partnership, a purpose, and perhaps something even more powerful than either of them yet realized. It was a cloudy Thursday when Eleanor Wynne opened the narrow drawer beneath her office desk, the one she rarely touched. Inside was a small cedar box, unmarked its corners, worn smooth by years of movement and memory. She lifted the lid carefully like she always did, as if any abrupt motion might scatter the pieces of the past she had stored there. Inside lay a folded piece of faded gray fabric, a mechanic's shop towel frayed at the edges and stained with soot and blood. She had kept it for 10 years, not for its utility, but because it had once been wrapped around her forearm as she lay dazed beside a burning vehicle, not knowing if she would live through the night. The man who had tied it around her arm had vanished before she could say thank you. Until now. Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly as she took the cloth out and held it in both hands. She turned toward the window. The skyline stretched before her, steel and glass and cloud. But her gaze didn't rest on the buildings. It turned inward to the memory of flames, the heavy smell of gasoline, and a calm, steady voice telling her, "You're going to be okay." She hadn't known his name then. Now she did. Liam Carter. And this cloth, this simple, unassuming object, was the only thing she had of him until fate had spun its wheel and brought him back through the glass. She needed him to see it, not for validation, not even for closure, but because for the first time in her adult life, she had the chance to connect something broken in her past to something real in her present. She folded the towel and slipped it into a linen pouch, then tucked it carefully into her handbag. That evening, the garage lights glowed warm against the fading sky. Eleanor stepped into Liam's modest workspace, a corner he had cleaned up and outfitted with tool sketches and an old coffee pot that seemed perpetually brewing. She found him hunched over a blueprint, one hand holding a pencil, the other absent-mindedly tapping to the rhythm of a classic rock tune playing from a nearby radio. "Hey," she called softly. Liam looked up surprised, then smiled. "Didn't expect you this late. I had something I wanted to show you." He wiped his hands and gestured to the second stool near the workbench. She sat and handed him the pouch. Liam hesitated before opening it, the fabric whispering softly as he unfolded it in his lap. Recognition hit him like a slow-breaking wave. "I thought I'd lost this," he said quietly. "You left it on my lap when the fire trucks arrived," Eleanor said. "I was in shock. You'd already gone." Liam smoothed the cloth between his fingers. "I was afraid if I stayed, someone would start asking questions I couldn't answer." Eleanor tilted her head. "Like what? Like why a 26-year-old with no family, no insurance, and a car full of stolen auto parts was driving through upstate New York at 1 in the morning?" She blinked. "You stole car parts. I didn't say they weren't mine," he said with a half grin. "Just that I couldn't prove they were mine." She shook her head, amused despite herself. "That towel, it was the only thing I had to hold on to. Not just physically, emotionally. When I was in recovery, I would wake up panicked, unable to breathe. And I'd hold it, like it still carried some part of you." Liam looked down. "I'm sorry I disappeared." "I'm not," she said gently. "If you hadn't, I might never have looked for you. And I would have never learned that not all heroes wear uniforms. Some wear grease-stained flannel and walk away before anyone knows their name." Liam swallowed hard. There were things he had never told anyone. Not Wyatt, not Sam. How that night had shaken him. Not because he had pulled someone out of a car, but because he had realized he could lose everything in a moment. 1 second slower and she might have died. Or he might have. And no one would have known who he was or what he stood for. That night had scared him, not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. "You know," he said slowly, "for a long time, I didn't believe I deserved good things. Not after what I'd seen, what I'd lost. People like me, we fix stuff. We don't get fixed." Eleanor's voice was calm but steady. "Maybe that's why you're exactly the kind of person who should be part of this project. Because you don't pretend. You understand what it's like to break. And to build again." He looked at her. Really looked. Not just as the woman in heels who once ruled the skyline, but as someone who carried her own cracks and scars. Someone who had survived things too. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Not just the project, but me." She hesitated, then said something she hadn't even admitted to herself until now. "Because I want to believe that people can come full circle, that the good we put into the world doesn't vanish. It waits, and maybe if we're lucky, it finds its way back." Liam didn't speak. He just nodded, slow and deliberate, as if accepting a truth he'd been too afraid to name. Then gently he folded the towel and handed it back to her. But she shook her head. No, she said. It was always yours. He took it, held it for a moment, then tucked it into his back pocket. You ever think about how weird this is, he asked. You a billionaire sitting in a dusty garage talking about fate and towels with a guy who still buys day-old bread. Eleanor grinned. You ever think about how lucky I am that the guy who saved me turned out to be someone I actually want to work with? Their laughter mingled soft and sincere, echoing in the space between rusted toolboxes and fresh beginnings. And as the night settled in, the cloth no longer felt like a remnant of the past. It felt like a thread that had finally found its way back home. Rain tapped steadily against the window of Liam's apartment, a soft rhythm that normally helped him fall asleep. But tonight the sound only sharpened his restlessness. The tiny clock on the nightstand glowed 2:14 a.m. His eyes had been open for hours. Down the hall he could hear Sam coughing, a dry, wheezing sound that had grown more frequent in the past few days. Liam sat up, rubbed his face, and walked quietly toward his brother's room. Sam lay curled beneath a thin blanket, sweat dampening his hair despite the cold. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the water glass on the nightstand and missed. Liam caught it just in time, kneeling beside the bed. You okay? He asked softly. Sam nodded, or tried to. Just, a little tired. Liam frowned. The boy looked pale, paler than usual. He gently touched Sam's forehead, hot. I'll call Dr. Mendoza first thing in the morning. Sam tried to smile. Don't freak out. It's just one of those nights. Liam didn't answer. He tucked the blanket tighter and sat beside the bed long after Sam's breathing evened out. And then, with a sinking feeling in his gut, he reached for his phone. By noon, Sam was admitted to the clinic. Pneumonia. Not life-threatening, the doctor said, not yet, but serious enough to need immediate care. The hospital would keep him for a few days to monitor his lungs. Liam stood outside the clinic, shoulders hunched against the wind. His hands trembled slightly as he dialed his insurance provider. After 42 minutes on hold, a flat voice informed him the coverage had lapsed due to missed paperwork and overdue premiums. They could reinstate, for a fee he didn't have. Not without giving something up, or someone. He leaned against the brick wall, closed his eyes, and counted his options. There weren't many. His phone buzzed. Eleanor Wynne. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the answer button. Then slowly he declined the call. Back at the garage, Wyatt found him pacing. What's wrong? He asked, wiping his hands on a shop rag. Liam explained everything: Sam's condition, the insurance, the impossible math he couldn't make work, no matter how many times he ran the numbers. I could call her, Wyatt offered cautiously. Eleanor. I know you two are close now. No, Liam snapped. Then softer. No. I can't. Why the hell not? Because she's not a lifeline. She's a person, and I'm not dragging her into this. Wyatt gave him a long look. You think she wouldn't want to help? That's not the point, Liam said. If I let her help me now when I'm at my lowest, how do I know it's ever going to be about anything but debt pity? Is that what you think she feels for you? I don't know what she feels, Liam said, but I know how I'd feel. Wyatt didn't argue, just nodded slowly and walked away. 3 days passed. Eleanor hadn't called again, and Liam didn't reach out. He kept his head down at the garage during the day and spent his evenings beside Sam's hospital bed, watching over him like a sentry. He thought of Eleanor constantly, of the way she looked at him like he mattered. Not as a project, not as a symbol, but as a man. He missed her voice, her fierce intelligence, her unguarded moments in the garage. But more than that, he missed the way she made him feel like his story wasn't over. And still he stayed silent. Until the fourth night. He arrived at the hospital late after working a double shift. He was exhausted, running on gas station coffee and worry. As he stepped into Sam's room, he froze. Eleanor was there, sitting by Sam's bedside, talking softly. She looked up when she heard the door and stood slowly, her expression unreadable. I used the emergency contact on his form, she said quietly. I hope that's okay. Liam blinked, too stunned to speak. I've been worried, she continued. You disappeared. I had to take care of things. You think I didn't want to help? I didn't want you to feel like you had to. She stepped forward, her voice suddenly sharper, not angry, but hurt. Do you honestly think I look at you and see someone I have to help? He looked down, ashamed. I thought we were building something real, Liam. Something based on truth, on trust. But the moment things got hard, you shut me out, because it wasn't your burden. She took a deep breath. That night 10 years ago, you saved me without hesitation. You didn't know my name, you didn't ask who I was. You just acted because it was the right thing. Liam didn't answer. So let me ask you now, why is it so hard to let someone else do the same for you? The question hit him harder than he expected. I've spent so long being strong, he said barely above a whisper. For Sam, for myself. I didn't know how to be anything else. Maybe strength isn't just about carrying others, Eleanor said. Maybe it's also about letting someone carry you. There was silence between them. Then Liam looked up. I'm scared, he admitted. I'm scared that if I let someone in, they'll see everything I've tried to hide. She stepped closer. I already see it, and I'm still here. Her hand found his, firm, warm, unshaking. And Liam, who had once dragged a stranger from a flaming wreck without thinking, let himself feel the weight of someone reaching back. Later that night, they sat side by side in the hospital corridor, sipping bad coffee and watching the rain streak across the windows. Eleanor rested her head lightly against his shoulder. Tomorrow, she said, I want you to come back to the project. Not because you owe me, but because the world needs what you bring to it. And I do too. Liam nodded slowly. I will. And in that quiet hallway surrounded by hums of machines and distant footsteps, something changed. Not in the world, but in him. For the first time in years, Liam Carter stopped carrying his life like a burden and began carrying it like a story still being written. The boardroom on the 44th floor of Everlight Tower was a cathedral of power. Long mahogany table, leather chairs, windows tall enough to make Manhattan seem small. Eleanor had sat at the head of that table for 6 years, firm, composed, surgically brilliant. But today her seat was empty. Instead, she stood by the windows, arms crossed, staring out at the city that once defined her identity. She could hear the murmurs behind her directors shuffling papers, executive assistants whispering her legal counsel, tapping nervously on a tablet. She didn't flinch when her name was called. Ms. Wynne, are you sure about this? Her CFO, Marcus Langley, spoke with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Eleanor turned, meeting his gaze directly. Yes, she said. I'm stepping down. The room fell still. Langley blinked. But why now? We just finalized the acquisition with SolarPoint. You have a seat at the top of the clean energy market. Your leadership was always meant to be transitional, Eleanor interrupted, and I'm transitioning to something more important. Her attorney shifted in his chair. Eleanor, stepping back is one thing, but to fully resign and reallocate your shares to the community foundation, that's unheard of. She nodded calmly. That's the point. It should be heard of. Langley stood. You're giving up $1 billion position. What exactly is worth more than that? Eleanor didn't blink. Impact, she said. Human impact. Not metrics, not market share, not optics. Real people. Real change. Langley scoffed. Is this about the mechanic? Her voice, though quiet, struck with precision. This is about me. Silence again. The kind that only follows truth too sharp to ignore. 3 days later, Eleanor stood beside Liam at the site of their first pilot garage in a low-income neighborhood, just east of Queens. The building was a rundown body shop they'd leased for next to nothing, a place that smelled like rust and hope. Sunlight streamed through broken window panes. Dust hung in the air like old memories. Liam had a blueprint rolled out over the hood of a stripped-down Dodge. Here's where we can install the hybrid training rig, he said, tapping the layout. It's basic, but if we get the kids under the hood early, we can teach the fundamentals in weeks. Eleanor leaned over his shoulder, absorbing every detail. And the solar charging port over there. He pointed toward a fenced corner of the lot. We'll need some retrofitting. Nothing I can't handle. She smiled, the warmth in her expression unmistakable. You say that like you didn't just overhaul 2 entire engines by yourself in 36 hours? He shrugged. You offered me a challenge. And you delivered. They paused, both of them aware of the quiet pride threading the moment together. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was a legacy, one neither of them had planned, but both knew they were born to build. You really left it all behind, Liam said after a moment, his voice almost cautious. Eleanor looked up at the sky. Not all of it, she said, just the part that kept me disconnected. From people, from purpose, from this. He studied her. A lot of people would have called that reckless. I call it returning to who I was before the tower, she replied. Before the suits, the speeches, the scripted success. And who was that? A woman who once thought her father's hands were magic because he could fix anything broken, she said softly. Including me. Liam's expression shifted something between admiration and deep understanding. You're still that woman, he said. She turned to him, eyes steady. And you're still the man who walked away from fire with his hands covered in someone else's blood and never once asked for credit. He looked down. That's because I didn't know what to do with it. Now you do. Just then, a group of high school students from a nearby vocational program arrived at the gate led by a counselor. Eleanor smiled and waved them in. Liam stepped forward, nodding to the teens who gawked at the cars and equipment like kids entering Disneyland. You ready to teach? She asked him, handing over a clipboard. I don't know how to teach, he said. Yes, you do, she replied. You teach by doing, by showing up. One of the students, a lanky boy with paint-stained sneakers, walked up to Liam. Hey, are you the guy who rebuilt that electric truck from scratch? Liam hesitated, then nodded. Cool, the kid said. I want to learn that. Liam smiled. You will. Later that evening, long after the students had left and the tools had been stored, Eleanor sat on the garage's front steps with Liam beside her. The sun was slipping beneath the skyline, casting gold across the cracked pavement. She looked sideways at him. You know this might actually work. He grinned. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not, she said. I'm hopeful. That's new for me, very. Liam tilted his head. You think people like us get happy endings? She was quiet for a long moment. Then maybe not the kind we're told to want, but the kind we choose, the kind we build with our own hands one part at a time. Yeah, I think we do. He nodded slowly, then reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. For once there was no glass between them. No boardroom titles, no social rungs, no fear. Just two people sitting in the dusk, rebuilding something real. Not from wealth, not from charity, but from faith in the idea that broken things, people, engines, systems can be made whole again, especially if you're brave enough to step down from the tower and start over at street level. The scent of engine oil mingled with fresh paint as sunlight spilled across the floor of the refurbished garage. A large banner, Engines of Hope Opening Day, hung proudly above the front bay door. Beneath it, rows of folding chairs were arranged neatly, and a makeshift stage stood at the front, flanked by two restored hybrid cars, symbols of what this place had become. Liam Carter stood off to the side, hands shoved into the pockets of his worn jeans, watching the volunteers bustle about. He wasn't used to crowds, certainly not ones that had come because of something he helped build. Eleanor approached quietly from behind clipboard and hand hair, pinned up in a simple twist that made her look both regal and completely at home among grease stains and toolboxes. You clean up pretty well, she said with a soft smile. Liam glanced at her. You sure this isn't too much? She raised a brow. Opening day of a fully funded youth mechanic apprenticeship program with the backing of a former Fortune 500 CEO and an entire community behind it. No, Liam. It's just enough. He offered a half smile. I don't exactly fit the keynote speaker profile. You're not here to impress donors, she said. You're here because you built this. With your hands, your time, your story. That's what people need to hear. Liam looked out at the crowd beginning to gather beyond the gate, families, students, local reporters, city officials. And somewhere in that sea of faces, Sam, out of the hospital now and recovering more each day, stood with Wyatt, both of them waving him forward like proud fathers. He took a slow breath. What if I mess it up? Eleanor stepped closer, her voice low and steady. Then we fix it. That's what you do, remember? Liam looked at her, then really looked at the woman who had once been just a stranger behind a pane of glass. Now she was something far more terrifying, someone who believed in him without conditions. The fear that had clung to him for years, the fear of not being enough, of failing someone who dared to care, began to loosen. He swallowed hard. Okay, he said. Let's do this. The speech was short, honest. Liam spoke about growing up without much, about dropping out of trade school to care for his brother, about learning the hard way how to fix things, because there was no one else to do it. He spoke about the day he pulled a stranger from a burning car, and how that moment had haunted and humbled him for a decade. And then he looked at Eleanor. She found me again, he said, his voice low but firm, when I was still trying to disappear. And instead of thanking me and moving on, she asked me to step into something bigger, to build something, not for her, but with her. He paused, letting the words settle in the warm spring air. This place isn't just a garage, it's a second chance. For all of us. For anyone who's ever been told they weren't enough. The audience rose in applause, some polite, some heartfelt, all moved. But Liam didn't seem to notice. His eyes remained on Eleanor, and hers never left him. Later, after the crowd had dispersed and the banner fluttered quietly in the wind, Liam and Eleanor stood in the center of the garage, surrounded by silence and possibility. That was, she began. Horrifying, Liam finished. She laughed. No, it was perfect. He looked down, fingers tracing the edge of a workbench. I never thought I'd end up here. Neither did I, she admitted. There was a long pause. Not awkward, not hesitant, just full. Then Liam said, "You gave up everything for this." Eleanor stepped closer. "No, I chose everything that mattered." He met her gaze. "What if I can't give you what you're used to?" She tilted her head. "What do you think I'm used to? Private jets, oceanfront conferences, seven-figure deals." She smiled, soft, genuine. "Liam, I've had all of that, and I've never felt more grounded than I do in this place, with grease on my shoes and sawdust in my hair. None of that ever made me feel known, or safe." He reached for her hand. She let him. "I don't have much," he said quietly. "But you give everything," she replied. "That's what love is, isn't it?" His breath caught just a little. She felt it in the stillness between them. Then she stepped even closer, her other hand resting on his chest above the beating heart that had once saved hers. "I know who you are," she said. "Not the man on the ladder, not the man in the shop. You. And I won't let you disappear again. Not because I need you to stay, but because I want you to." He cupped her face gently, his fingers brushing the edge of her jaw. "I've been fixing broken things my whole life," he said. "But you made me want to build something." She smiled through a sudden sheen of tears. "So let's build it," she whispered. And when he kissed her, unhurried, certain it wasn't the start of something new. It was the moment two halves of a long interrupted story finally rejoined. No glass between them, no past holding them apart. Just a shared promise forged from courage, compassion, and the quiet certainty that love, when chosen without fear, could be the strongest structure of all. The early summer morning had barely stretched across the sky when Liam's phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing on the cracked screen. He hesitated before answering, already sensing that good news never came this early. "Liam Carter," a clipped voice asked. "Yes, this is Sandra Levinson with Denton and Price LLP. You are named as a party in an intellectual property complaint filed by Orion Automotive." Liam stood motionless beside the coffee machine in the garage, mug, half-filled, steam rising, but forgotten. "I'm sorry," he said slowly. "A what?" "The complaint alleges that a hybrid engine modification technique you've publicly demonstrated and used in your recent pilot program infringes on proprietary methods developed during your prior employment at Orion." "That was 12 years ago," he said, stunned. "And I wasn't even part of the engineering team. There is a non-compete clause in a confidentiality agreement signed in 2011 which Orion claims you have violated. A cease and desist has been issued." The line went quiet. Liam's hand tightened around the phone knuckles, whitening. "Do not attempt to contact Orion directly," the voice added. "Any communication must go through legal channels." And just like that, the call ended. He stared at the screen as if it might blink away the last 5 minutes. The sound of a wrench clanging to the ground snapped Wyatt's head up from the carburetor he was tuning. "You all right?" he asked. Liam turned slowly. His face was blank, too still. "They're suing me," he said. "Orion, from back when I was just a tech." Wyatt stood, wiping his hands. "Suing you for what apparently one of the modifications I made to our training prototype is similar to a concept they buried in a research memo from a decade ago." He let out a bitter laugh. "I didn't even read half the stuff they buried me under back then." "You think this is a coincidence?" Wyatt asked. "No," Liam said. "I think it's because we're starting to get noticed, and they don't like where the spotlight is pointing." Wyatt crossed his arms. What are you going to do? Liam looked away. What I've always done, try to survive. Eleanor was in a planning meeting for the expansion site in Newark when she received the text. Come to the garage. Urgent. Liam. She didn't hesitate. When she arrived, she found him pacing in front of the garage, arms crossed tightly over his chest, eyes stormy. What happened? He handed her the notice. As her eyes scanned the legal jargon, her expression hardened. They want to shut us down, she said. They want to shut me down, he replied. This is about making me look like I stole something I barely understood a decade ago. They know it's not true. They don't care. They have lawyers. I have a torque wrench and a YouTube video. Eleanor met his gaze. You have me. He took a step back. Eleanor, I don't want you dragged into this. Too late. I'm already here. They'll come after the foundation next. After your name. She stepped closer, voice steady. Let them. He shook his head. I can't let this ruin you. She reached up, placing her palm flat against his chest. You saved my life once, she said. Let me protect yours. His jaw flexed. Pride warred with trust in the silence between them. And then he nodded. The press got wind of the lawsuit within 24 hours. Headlines ranged from cautious innovation or infringement to brutal from garage to courtroom. Is the Engines of Hope program, built on stolen tech. Liam barely slept. Every click of a news update felt like another nail in the coffin of what they had built. But Eleanor, she mobilized. She called in every contact she had from her corporate years. Former general counsels, investigative journalists, engineers who had walked away from Orion with similar scars. And when she stood before the local community board the following Thursday, she didn't mince words. Liam Carter didn't steal anything, she said firmly, standing at the same podium where he had once given his opening day speech. He built something new, something good. And this lawsuit is not about protecting innovation, it's about protecting power, about silencing someone who dared to create outside their system. Her words ignited a spark. Community members rallied. Former Orion employees anonymously submitted documents refuting the company's claim. A pro bono legal team offered to take the case, and then a week later, a twist Eleanor hadn't expected. Orion quietly withdrew the lawsuit. No apology, no public explanation. Just a terse legal memo closing the matter without prejudice. It didn't matter. They had won. That night, Eleanor and Liam sat on the rooftop of her apartment building, watching the lights of the city flicker like distant stars. He held the letter in his hands, the formal withdrawal of all charges. He had read it 5 times and still didn't know how to feel. Do you know what scares me most? He asked. What, that it almost worked. They almost made me believe I wasn't allowed to build something better. She turned to him. They wanted you to believe that. Because people like you change things. He looked at her. I've been afraid my whole life. Of failing, of being exposed, of not belonging. Her voice was soft but resolute. Then stop being afraid. You belong here with me with this. Not because someone gave you permission, but because you earned it. He took her hand fingers lacing through hers. They'll come again, won't they? He asked. Maybe, she said. But next time they'll know they're not just coming for you. He nodded. And for the first time in days, he allowed himself a full breath. The kind that fills not only lungs but empty spaces inside the soul. The kind that says, I made it through this, and I'm still standing. Liam Carter had once believed his only purpose was to fix broken things. But now, as he looked across a city where his name had once meant nothing, and into the eyes of a woman who saw his worth before he did, he understood he wasn't just fixing things anymore. He was building a future that couldn't be taken away. The soft clang of a socket wrench echoed through the garage like a heartbeat's steady, familiar grounding. Liam Carter stood under the open hood of a compact electric sedan, sleeves rolled, brow-furrowed, fingers smudged with grease. But for once, his thoughts weren't entirely on the engine. He hadn't spoken to Eleanor in 3 days. Not since the lawsuit had been dropped. Not since the press coverage died down. Not since he'd started feeling something he couldn't quite name. Something restless, conflicted, a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with bolts or engines. Across the garage, the banner still hung above the main bay. Engines of Hope. Kids from the pilot cohort had come and gone all morning, working on practice vehicles and scribbling notes. A few had even begun fixing neighbors' cars in the lot as part of their training. The dream was alive, breathing, but Liam felt outside of it. Not because he doubted the mission. He didn't. He doubted himself. Eleanor had given up everything: her title, her name in the corporate world, her pristine reputation to stand by his side. And all he'd brought to the table was an old cloth, a bruised past, and a heart too scared to say the words he knew she deserved to hear. So he did what he always did when he felt too much. He worked. Until Wyatt appeared behind him, arms crossed, expression carved, with something between concern and irritation. "You planning to take that thing apart down to the frame?" he asked. Liam didn't look up. "Maybe." Wyatt stepped closer, lowering his voice. "She stopped by this morning. You weren't here. I was running parts." She didn't believe that. Liam wiped his hands, turning toward the bench. "It's better this way," Wyatt scoffed. "Better for who? I don't want to drag her back into another storm." "She walked through the last one for you." Liam finally met his gaze. "She's Eleanor Wynne. She could walk back into any boardroom in the country. She could be anywhere, with anyone. And yet," Wyatt said evenly, "she keeps choosing you." Liam's jaw clenched. "What if I can't give her what she needs? Then let her tell you that. Don't decide for her. That's not love, Liam. That's fear in a hero's disguise." The words sank deep, too deep. That evening, long after the students had left and the streetlights flickered on one by one, Liam stood alone in the garage. The hum of the city was distant. All that remained was the sound of memory of Eleanor's laughter, when she stood barefoot in the garage that first night of her voice, when she told him, "Let's build something." He reached for the gray cloth folded on his bench, the same one he'd used to bandage her arm 10 years ago. It still carried the faintest trace of oil and time. He held it tight in his hand. Then he walked out the door. Eleanor wasn't expecting a visitor that night. She sat curled on the couch in her apartment, barefoot, glasses perched on her nose, reading proposals from a new group of community garages, seeking to replicate the model. When the doorbell rang, she froze. Something told her it wasn't a courier. She opened the door. Liam stood there, hair windblown, the gray cloth in one hand, his other shoved deep in his jacket pocket. His eyes met hers with the kind of intensity that only came from silence held too long. "I've been trying to walk away," he said. Eleanor didn't move, didn't speak, but every time I get close, something pulls me back. She blinked slowly. "Why?" "Because every time I leave, I remember something you said." He stepped forward, holding the cloth out to her. "You said you wouldn't let me go." Her breath caught, and I realized he continued. "I didn't want you to." He paused. "I'm not shiny. I'm not easy. I come with rust and dents and old wiring that sparks when I get scared. But I've got fuel left. I've got hands that can build, and a heart that finally knows where it belongs." Eleanor looked down at the cloth in his hands, then back at his face. "You sure?" He smiled, tired but whole. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." She stepped aside. "Then come in." He did. He didn't just walk through the door, he returned. Not as the man who saved her, not as the mechanic who kept disappearing, but as someone finally ready to stay. They sat on the couch, the city lights painting golden shadows across the hardwood floor. Eleanor turned to him, her hand resting on his knee. "Do you know what I realized when you didn't call for 3 days?" she asked. He shook his head. "I realized that I wasn't afraid you'd leave," she said. "I was afraid you'd think you had to." Liam swallowed hard. "I did, but not anymore," she asked. He looked at her, every word weighted with truth. "Not anymore." Silence. The good kind. The kind that holds the space between two people like a promise. Then softly she asked, "What changed?" "I did," he said. "Because of you." He leaned in and kissed her gently, reverently, as though he was sealing something he had waited years to believe. When they pulled apart, she rested her head against his shoulder. "I'm glad you came back," she whispered. "I didn't just come back," he murmured. "I came home." And in the stillness of that room, the door they once thought had closed between them stood open. Always had, always would. The late July sun rose over Queens, casting a golden glow over the warehouse-turned-community garage that now bore a freshly painted sign, "Engines of Hope, East Branch." The air buzzed with a quiet energy, not from machinery, but from people, young apprentices assembling around their workbenches, Local mechanics, volunteering hours, neighbors bringing in broken bikes, dented fenders, even their questions and pride. What had started as a single uncertain idea in a forgotten part of the city was now a growing movement. Liam stood just inside the open bay door, his arms folded as he watched the newest group of teens begin their week one assessments. The program had expanded, 2 more garages had opened in Newark and Yonkers. A waiting list had formed. There were talks of further growth in Detroit and Cleveland. But this morning was about something different. Today, Eleanor had planned something he hadn't expected. Not a fundraiser, not a speech, a reunion. He caught sight of her walking across the lot, now wearing jeans, a soft white button-down, and a leather satchel slung across her chest. Her hair was tied back, but a few strands had escaped, and she didn't bother tucking them in. She looked relaxed, at ease. She looked like someone who no longer belonged in glass towers, but in places where lives were rebuilt. "I still think you're secretly organizing a board meeting and just not telling me," Liam said as she reached him. She grinned. "You'll survive. What's this all about?" "You'll see," she said, then slipped inside the garage with a glint of mischief. By mid-morning, the front lot was arranged with folding chairs and a table covered in fresh lemonade, old photos, and handwritten notes. Liam raised an eyebrow. "This feels suspiciously ceremonial." Eleanor didn't deny it. "Today's for them." "The students?" She shook her head. "No, the people who never got thanked, who never took a bow." He frowned slightly, then looked again. The guests were arriving quietly unannounced with tentative smiles and worn jackets. They weren't CEOs or donors. They were local teachers, retired factory workers, community mentors, librarians. A man who taught his daughter how to change brake pads in their alley. A woman who had run a free reading program at a church for years. Unsung builders. The ones who patched together lives in silence. Every person here, Eleanor said, helped someone when no one was watching. And I thought maybe it's time someone watched. Liam turned to her. "You planned all this," she nodded. "You taught me something, you know. That impact doesn't always announce itself with applause. Sometimes it just keeps moving forward quietly, like a well-tuned engine." He looked out at the gathering crowd and felt something deep in his chest shift, something beyond pride, beyond gratitude. It was a recognition of kinship, of purpose. This wasn't just his story anymore. The ceremony began with simple words. Eleanor stood on a small wooden platform beside Liam, the open bay doors framing them in the light. "Today," she said, "we honor those who made change not by wealth, but by presence, who showed up again and again for others, even when no one clapped. This garage exists because of you." She nodded toward the crowd. "And because of one man who never asked for thanks." Liam looked up, startled. "He showed me that a life lived in quiet integrity can be louder than any resume. That kindness, when consistent, is revolutionary." She turned to him. "Liam Carter, come here." He reluctantly stepped forward as everyone clapped longer than he was comfortable with, but warmly. Eleanor reached into the bag at her feet and pulled out a plaque. Simple, wooden, hand-carved. It read, "The Bridge Builders. For those who cross over and bring others with them." Liam held the plaque, his thumb brushing the engraving. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said. The applause returned, and Liam stood there absorbing it, not as an accident of circumstance or a reluctant hero, but as a man who had earned his place, who had brick by brick, belief by belief, built something that would long outlast him. Later, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and the guests lingered with coffee and conversation, Liam and Eleanor walked the perimeter of the lot. "I've been thinking," she said. "Dangerous," he teased. She smiled. "I want to make this permanent. The foundation, the program, maybe even a national apprenticeship track. We've been reacting to interest. I want to lead it." He studied her. "You really left that world behind, didn't you?" "I did. But I didn't leave behind my skills, just the system that tried to define them." He nodded. "So what would you need from me?" She stopped walking, turned toward him. "You already gave me the blueprint," she said. "I just want you to keep doing what you've always done." He raised an eyebrow. "Be the bridge," she said, "between kids who don't know they matter yet and the world that needs them more than ever." He took her hand. "You think we're ready for something that big?" She looked at him, no doubt in her eyes. I think we already started it. A gust of warm summer wind rustled the trees beyond the fence. The sound of tools clinking and laughter drifted from the garage, the future humming in the background like a perfectly tuned machine. And as Liam looked at the plaque in his hand, the bridge builders, he finally understood something he'd never dared hope. This wasn't just redemption, it was legacy. One built not of steel or stone, but of compassion, courage, and 1,000 quiet moments of showing up when it mattered most. He squeezed Eleanor's hand gently. Let's build the rest of it together. The sky was soft with the first light of dawn, casting pale golden ribbons across the glass facade of Everlight Tower. From street level, the tower still shimmered with quiet power, unchanged in form perhaps, but no longer a place of solitary ambition. Not to Eleanor Wynne. She stood on the 36th floor, just inside the office where it all began. It looked different now. The stark minimalism had softened. Family photos lined the window ledge. A plant Liam had bought on a whim and insisted wouldn't last a week thrived in the corner, stubborn and leafy. But the glass was the same. She approached the window and laid her hand on it, right where she had touched it that day. The memory remained vivid. Liam on the other side, harnessed against the wind, unaware he was about to be pulled back into the life of the woman he once saved. A single moment had rippled into something neither of them could have imagined. Behind her, the elevator chimed. Liam stepped in quietly, his jacket slung over one shoulder, his expression easy and open. There was a lightness to his step now. No longer the man who carried his world like a weight, but one who moved as if he finally understood that he belonged. Funny place to find you, he said, walking up beside her. Just paying tribute, she said, to the pane of glass that changed everything. He smiled. Glass didn't change anything. You did. She turned to face him, warmth blooming in her chest. You ready? He asked. Almost. Together they looked out over the city, over the lives they'd touched, the bridges they'd built, and the quiet revolution they'd begun. It wasn't about headlines anymore. It wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about building what had never existed before. A life, a legacy, a love born not of convenience, but of courage. The wedding was small, intimate by design. A community garden in Brooklyn strung with white lights and folding chairs. No press, no gilded altars. Just family, friends, apprentices, and laughter. Sam stood beside Liam as best man, his health stronger every day, his smile wide and easy. Eleanor wore a dress the color of champagne and danced barefoot on the grass. Liam, in a clean suit jacket and his ever-reliable work boots, looked like a man who'd finally come home. Instead of a traditional ceremony, they told stories. Wyatt talked about the first time Liam rebuilt an engine using duct tape and hope. Sam shared how Eleanor had once snuck hospital-grade protein shakes into his room under the guise of smoothie taste tests. Even the students stood to speak one by one about how a dusty garage and a quiet man had changed their lives. When it was Eleanor's turn, she looked out at the faces surrounding her and then back at Liam. I spent most of my life looking through glass, she said, observing, working, achieving, but always from behind a barrier. And then one day, I looked out and saw a man who had once saved me before I ever had a title or a reason to be remembered. He didn't wait for thanks. He didn't ask for attention. He just acted. She turned to Liam, eyes brimming. And then he saved me again. Not from fire, but from forgetting what mattered. Liam stepped forward gently, taking her hand. I used to think I didn't deserve anything good, he said, his voice thick. That my job was to fix things for other people, and if I was lucky, I wouldn't break in the process. But you, his gaze held hers. You showed me that sometimes love doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just arrives. And if you're brave enough to open the door, it'll build something with you never thought possible. They kissed under the glow of string lights, surrounded by the kind of silence that only comes from being completely seen and wholly loved. A few months later, Liam found himself back where it all began, the scaffolding outside Everlight Tower. He wasn't washing windows anymore. That wasn't his job. But today he was there to help install a new art piece commissioned for the company's lobby, a tribute to the founding of Engines of Hope. He stood with a welding torch in hand, overseeing the final installation. The sculpture was made from salvaged car parts, engine belts, and glass panels, each etched with the names of early apprentices and donors. At its center, encased in glass, was a gray cloth, the same one he'd used to bandage Eleanor 10 years before. She'd wanted it there not as a symbol of pain, but of healing. A reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures can shape the biggest futures. He looked down as the apprentices helped polish the glass. A new generation? Kids who didn't know what impossible felt like because someone had taken the time to show them otherwise. He smiled. Not because life was perfect, but because it was true. That night back at their apartment, Eleanor found him in the kitchen sleeves rolled, trying and failing to replicate her mother's peach cobbler recipe. Flour streaked his cheek. The kitchen looked like a minor disaster. "You know you can just order dessert, right?" she teased. He grinned. "Where's the fun in that?" She walked over, wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, and rested her chin on his shoulder. "I like this life," she said softly. "So do I. You think we'll ever go back to the way things were?" "No," he said, turning to face her. "Because we're not meant to. We're not fixing the past, Elle. We're building something better." And they were. Together. From a pane of glass to a lifetime of purpose, they had crossed every bridge and now stood on the far side of it. Not as saviors or symbols, but as partners. Loving. Living. And proving day by day that when love meets courage, miracles aren't just possible, they're inevitable. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We're always amazed by how far these stories travel. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next inspiring chapter. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share the next story with you. Until then, take care and stay kind.